Hi everybody and welcome to SA Rugby Magazine. I'm Kevin Ferguson and this is Mark Keohane. Mark, welcome again.
Thanks, Kev.
Always a pleasure having your knowledge here.
Thanks for the kind words.
The only ones you're getting today. Let's chat about the rugby. Well, I think it was a meaningless game, Australia versus the Kiwis.
It's always the game that gives Australia hope. They always win that kind of meaningless dead rubber letters low. People think there's a revival. The guns come out for New Zealand and kind of everything's restored the next year when there's actually something on the line. I did feel it was kind of, we spoke earlier in the week, or latter part of last week, was going to be a lot closer than what the bookies had said, which was 15, that 14 and a half, I think was the point spread.
Yeah.
And we said it would be a one-score game. We still felt New Zealand had enough to win, but where was the motivation? We looked at the team he had picked, that kind of thing. But looking at the game, and I look at all the comments that come out of New Zealand from their media, they have climbed into that team for a lack of mongrel, a lack of patience, a lack of composure. All the kind of criticisms that were there with the All Blacks leading into the 2019 World Cup. And I think what has shown is he's definitely got an A team and a B team. And when we look at that Sydney 43-5 win in the rain, very difficult conditions, it looked like we were watching a very well-drilled Crusaders team play. Watching that game, we were watching a flamboyant Hurricanes or Blues team play. The hard work wasn't really done by the tight five. Australia fronted particularly well. And New Zealand's backs were, individually they're great players, but they haphazard, they threw the ball around, they played behind the game line. Beauden Barrett never once took control of the game and said, this is going nowhere. We've got 20 minutes to go in this game. We're 15-11 up. We need to play in their 22. Let them score the 80-metre try to win this thing. They just brought Australia back into it in that last 15, and then all the momentum was with Australia, and they deservedly won it. A lot made of the red cards and the yellow cards. There was never a mismatch in terms of numbers. So 14 played 14, 14 played 13 at one stage, and then 14 played 13 at the other stage. It was a game that should have been won 5 minutes before halftime. New Zealand, one-man advantage, and camping on their try line. I think they had 5 line-out throws, and then they stuffed up the last one. Second half, that first 15 to 10 minutes when they had the one-man advantage, also did nothing. So I looked at how they've been rated over the 4 tests, and everyone's given them a 6 out of 10. They're giving the Wallabies a 4 out of 10. I think that's par for the course.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reflective. You know, the glaring thing for me is just the lack of Springbok involvement in this championship makes it a non-competition.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, 2 Bledisloe Cup test matches, to me, is like where it should be.
Yeah.
And to have 4 in a row, and also the kind of teams that they fielded, then it all becomes experimental. It reminds me a bit of these ODIs, when it's a best-of-7 series and a team goes 4-0 up, and then they play the last 3 and they rest in everyone, and everyone thinks there's this revival, and it's like, the one thing that I had to kind of remind some people on social media on Saturday, they said, the greatest comeback ever, 38-point defeat and a 2-point win. No, one team made 10 changes. So you played the A team last week and you took 40. You played the B team and you snuck a 1. So to see it in that kind of light and to kind of get some perspective, but there's really, even the players are talking about a rugby championship, a Tri-Nations, they don't know which one they're talking about.
Yeah.
So New Zealand, they got the league points plus a winning bonus point in Sydney. That game doubled as a Tri-Nations match. They got a losing bonus point there, so they effectively have to beat Argentina twice, which you'd expect them to do on neutral ground. They haven't ever lost to Argentina. They drew once in Buenos Aires, and since that they're on a 27 winning streak. And if they did lose to an Argentinian side that hasn't played a test match, they've had 2 warm-up games against Aussie A, won both. I didn't even know they were playing Aussie A.
No, I never knew they were playing.
Then you'd say, well, they've got some serious problems. But I think what it did show is that there is a big difference between the A and the B side. And when New Zealand plays structured rugby, they're far more effective than when they try and play this flamboyant game. But we spoke before the show started. If you look at when South Africa beat New Zealand in 2009 in Hamilton, and then when they beat them in 2018 in Wellington, New Zealand lost 10 out of 120 tests, a 91% winning return, which is just
not bad.
Not bad. It's just unheard of in international sport.
But I think that created an expectation and a myth that's the level that the Kiwis always play at.
Yeah, that the All Blacks. So for a decade, people have just been watching and think New Zealand wins 90% of their games. They don't. So if you look since then,
They did.
They did in that decade, but
Yeah.
since then they've lost 5 and drawn 3 out of 23. So they won 15. That gives them a 65% win record over the last 2 years, since 2018. South Africa's overall win record historically is 65%. England's is 64%. So what it does do is bring New Zealand right back into that pack. And that's a fantastic average to have, a 65, 66% winning average. As you say, their public was spoiled. Maybe the world was spoiled by that 91% win return. And if you look at the quality of New Zealand players at the moment, there's not the McCaws, and there's not the Carters, there's not the Kieran Reeds, there's not those young front rankers coming through. Brody Retallick's unavailable at the moment. There's not a young Sam Whitelock. Just the depth of player that they had. If you go back to the 2015 World Cup, when you've got Sonny Bill Williams and Bowden Barrett coming off the bench after 40 minutes, then you've got some power, and that's why they were winning games so comfortably in the last 20. If you were seeing the players they were introducing into that last 20, they don't have that level of depth on the bench at the moment, and they're very much one of the pack. And the more we keep on saying it, the more people condemn us and say, oh, you're anti-New Zealand, the All Blacks, there's no such thing as a weak All Black team. There's also a thing as a vulnerable All Black team, just like there's a vulnerable Bok and England team. So I thought it was a result that kind of once again gave perspective to those 4 test matches, because that 43-5 blowout, all of a sudden people were saying All Blacks best team in the world again. No, they're not. They haven't played England, they haven't played South Africa, and dare I say it at the moment, and I will, they would lose to France if they had to play them.
Yeah.
France is really looking good, and they would struggle against Ireland. So they don't have a tight 5. They've got an average pack at best, and when they do pick their best backline, and it has to be Mahanga at 10 and Aaron Smith at 9, they will always be more than competitive. But the next 2 years is going to be fantastic when we do get international rugby back, when teams are travelling. It will be the first time in a long time that New Zealand goes north and no one actually knows what the result is. And when they play South Africa, it's not a given at home even that they're going to win. So it's really just kind of restored the equilibrium about international rugby, where you should be going to a game when the top 6 are playing and not knowing who's actually going to win.
Yeah, we haven't had that for a long time. Where would you rate? Who would you rate the top 5 rugby clubs, rugby international sides right now?
Right now, I would say South Africa, based on the World Cup when they haven't played for a year. England definitely 2. I would say New Zealand probably 3, grouped with France at the moment. Then Ireland. Wales have certainly fallen back under Pivac. They still have good players. Scotland, Argentina, Fiji, they're all there 8, 9.
Possibly
and
Japan.
and then there's possibly Japan, and then the rest are just, we know where they are, 10 to 100, you know.
Yeah. And that's the failing of the IRB, isn't it, to develop the game beyond 10 nations.
Beyond 10 nations, and you've only ever consistently got 6 to 8 nations. Sorry, I left Australia out there. That's meaningless. They've been at times for me, but I would put them in. I would put Ireland and Australia packaged together. So I'd go definitely South Africa ahead at the moment, comfortably, of England, New Zealand, France together, Australia and Ireland together, and then the rest at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks, Mark, for that. And it's hard to disagree with that. It's nice to see the Kiwis coming back to into the pack, because they've been put on this pedestal for so long, and deservedly so. But they're not the world beaters that people have made them out to be. And we've said that they're going to struggle under Foster. And it's a combination. It's a combination of a new coach, one that shouldn't have been appointed, in my opinion, and a combination of a life cycle of players coming and going and starting a new cycle. And it's not the sort of caliber of player that we're used to seeing, or have had the privilege of seeing coming from New Zealand in the last 10.
Yeah, and I think that to keep on emphasising this to those who watch our show, we're talking about this current All Blacks. We're not knocking McCaw and his All Blacks and what they did.
No.
So when we say this All Black side is vulnerable, it's not the All Blacks are vulnerable. This All Black side is vulnerable.
Yeah.
This squad of players at the moment doesn't have the look, and I know it's still early days, of winning the World Cup in 2023. Yes, they'll be up there. They're a top 5, top 3 team consistently. But you look at certain teams and you think, wow, there's potential in that. This French team has potential. The Boks have huge potential. Something about the Australians, if they get it right, they have potential. This New Zealand side, you just wonder, mentally again, are we going through another generation of players that have got all the skills, all the talent, but mentally are like marshmallows upstairs?
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the 23 World Cup is going to be in France, and they'll have one hell of a team, or they'll be building towards a hell of a team to compete for that World Cup.
Yeah, and for the first time at national level, they've got their coach right. Fabien Galtier, wonderful captain, very successful when he coached domestically in France. Long overdue, and he's certainly getting his selections right and picking the form players, bringing back some very good experienced players, and you just don't see the usual 14 changes every week that you normally get with French coaches. So he's brought some calm to them, and I'd like to see how they go in this eight-nation tournament, and obviously next year when we're back to a form of normal, which we hope it will be, with crowds, and then playing the Southern Hemisphere teams.
Indeed, look forward to that.